her bow is at a cant. When she comes into full draw position, the bow is now perfectly vertical. So let me ask you a question. Does that actually matter? Does it matter if the bow's on a cant through the draw if it comes into anchor and is vertical? I'll tell you this. So it does matter if the bow is on a cant, okay? Particularly at long distance, or the more variance you have in your bow cant, the more it'll change your left-right groupings on the target, and you'll have a left-right spread. So it doesn't take much cant at all at long distance to push your arrows out of the 10. It's not so important what the cant is as much as the variance in the cant. So if it's very consistent, but you have a 1 degree cant every single time, that's okay. Now, if we look at Gabby, what she's doing is she's kind of canting the bow during the draw this way into pre-draw, this position. The bow is on quite a big cant. She then comes into anchor, and as she's anchoring, it straightens out. So I want to jump back to the first angle because I guess the question that comes to mind for me is I don't really so much care if the bow's canted at pre-draw. What I care about is how is she straightening it out. For example, in pre-draw position, we can see, if you have a look at this arm rotation, what I teach is that from raise to pre-draw is when that rotation happens. Boom. Good job, Gabby. Thumbs up. Okay, so by the time she finishes pre-draw, that arm is set. That means at this point, the arm is rotated and the bow is still canted. Because pre-draw, the bow is canted. And when she comes into anchor, the bow is still canted. And only once she's in anchor, you can actually see, just look at this shimmer on the riser here. Let me zoom right in on that sucker. You can see that it's after she anchors, the bow straightens out. And it's probably as she's touching the string to her nose, or that's probably the subconscious cue for her to straighten out that bow cant, okay? Yeah. And what that is to me is it's showing that she's having to twist in the hand. If you look at it really close on that front hand here, let me just draw your attention to that. Yeah. So the arm's not rotating, but the wrist is. So I think that can cause some inconsistency in potentially a pressure distribution into the grip and potentially cause a little bit of torque or reaction in the bow, inconsistency in the front hand. So what I'm going to say to Gabby is that in her shot process, I don't really mind if the bow is canted during, say, the raise part. But from pre-draw, once the front arm is set, this is the stage where I'm going to ask her to level out the bow so that it stays level when she comes into anchor and it doesn't so much have that consistency. In my mind, at pre-draw position, that's where the bow is, I mean, your shot, your technique, your structure and everything is already pretty much 90% set at that stage. The more adjustments you're doing between pre-draw and anchor, the more things can go wrong. A lot of archers pull into full draw and then they adjust everything. Wow, there's too much stuff going on. And often the way I think about pre-draw is, imagine you're going skydiving. What are the steps involved in skydiving? It's not just stepping out of the plane and then pulling on the ripcord. That's the last step, okay? Before that, you've got to check the weather, okay? Which way's the wind's going? Where's my drop-off zone? Talk to the pilot about it. You've got to pack the parachute. That's pretty important. Make sure it's packed correctly. You've got to get in the plane. You've got to make sure the green light's on or someone's yelling go or the right cue that you're over your drop-off zone. You've got to make sure that your harnesses, buckles are checked and double-checked before you leave the plane. And you don't want to be 1 foot out of the plane and then making checks. It's just inviting things to go wrong. Same thing with pre-draw. You don't want to be kind of drawing the bow and then checking all this stuff. It's too late. You're going to make mistakes. What you need to do is in the raise to pre-draw position, we've already achieved posture, shoulder alignment. Stance is already set, obviously. Hook set on the string. Pressure point set into the grip. You've achieved shoulder alignment. Front arm set. Direction is all there. Simply now, you're pulling the ripcord. You are setting the scapula, keeping the fluidity going, power through the back, elbow coming around. You know, when you come into anchor, if you train properly, you'll have synchronized up your aiming sequence. And so there's very little aiming to do or corrections to make. And now you've just got to execute with confidence. And the archers, if you look at top archers, the archers who do have a very distinct pre-draw position, like Lim Si-yeon or Kang Chae-yong, some Olympic gold medalists and former world number ones, or current world number ones, I think. They have a very distinct pre-draw, and then when they come into anchor, there's almost no adjustment needed. They rip it through, they shoot quite quickly. But they have everything set up from pre-draw, and I like teaching that style. So, back to Gabby. She actually does have a reasonably good pre-draw, but one thing we can tidy up is that bow cant.